Mom called for my arrest after I caught her cheating with her church parishioner and exposed her text messages. My mom is 45 years old, and my dad is 48 years old. They have been married for 23 years. My dad is a very calm and quiet person, and my mom has been in charge of managing our home for a while, even though my dad earns the money for our family. As far back as I can remember, I've seen my mom treat my dad without respect. It reached a point where he has been treated badly for so long that he just allows it to happen and doesn't pay attention to her behavior. If you look at pictures of my dad when he was young, you'd see a really happy expression on his face. But as they've been married for a longer time, that happiness has started to fade away. If you searched for the word narcissist, I think you'd see a picture of my mom. My mom and I have a relationship that's a mix of love and conflict. Sometimes, we argue so much that she tells me to leave the house, and I end up staying at my boyfriend's or relative's place. One Saturday, I slept in because I had spent time with my boyfriend the night before. When I woke up, I realized that everyone had left the house. I sat down in the living room to watch TV, and I noticed that my mom had left her phone on the couch. I was curious, so I unlocked her phone and saw some unread text messages. One message stood out to me. I opened it and read through it, and what I saw really surprised me. It was clear that she had been seeing another man secretly for many years. The messages were long conversations about meeting up, flirting, and even my mom sending pictures of herself wearing very little clothing. It seemed like she was the one starting things, and sometimes he wanted to stop it, but they would start talking again. They didn't really hide their affair because everything was clearly written in the text messages. I felt really mad, not just because of the betrayal, but also because it felt like my mom was being two-faced. She had always given me a hard time about having a boyfriend, but all this time, she had been cheating on my dad with this man for what seemed like a really long time. I took lots of pictures and went through everything again. I was really close to my older sister, and she had her own place. So, I called her, and she was also surprised by what I found out. The affair was still happening. My sister thought we should let mom tell dad the truth, but I didn't think she would do it, so I didn't agree. The next day, I went back to college without telling my dad about any of this. Then, I got a text from my mom saying sorry that I didn't want to talk to her. I was confused, so I messaged my sister to ask if she knew what my mom meant. My sister said she had talked to mom, but mom denied cheating. While I was texting my mom, she said she wasn't having an affair. She said she was just visiting a therapist. I didn't tell her that I had evidence of her affair, but I did let her know I had seen the messages. She tried to say those messages were with her therapist, but I knew she was lying because I had seen the truth. Just to be certain, I looked up information about the guy involved. I was surprised to find out that the man had a girlfriend and kids from a past relationship. He also shares religious writings on his Facebook, so he might be someone important in the church, the same church my mom attends. I guess that's where they met. When I realized that my mom wasn't going to admit her affair, I called my dad and told him about it. But I didn't show him any evidence. I thought my dad might talk to my mom about it, but he didn't. As I mentioned earlier, my dad wasn't the kind of person to confront things directly. My mom figured out that my dad knew about the affair when she noticed he seemed sad for some reason. She kept asking him to tell her what was wrong. Eventually, my dad told her that he knew about the affair because my sister and I had informed him, although we didn't show him any proof. I wasn't there to see their conversation, but I knew my mom had a way of influencing my dad because she could easily persuade him. After my mom had lied to my dad about seeing a therapist and accused me of invading her privacy, I texted her and let her know that I had evidence of her affair. That's when my mom understood that things wouldn't be easy for her this time. The worst thing my mom did during all of this was asking me to erase the evidence from my phone. She also said that if I wanted to return home, I needed to say sorry and remove the things from my phone. I also talked to my grandma about what happened. I'm not surprised or upset that she's taking my mom's side. I do think my grandma might have known about my mom's cheating, or at least that she wasn't happy with my dad. This whole situation has been really stressful, and I'm relieved that I could tell my dad about it and get it off my chest. Honestly, my main focus is to support my dad the most. I wasn't really concerned about going back home because I could live with my boyfriend if needed. I noticed that my mom had turned everyone against me when my aunt told me it was wrong to check my mom's phone without talking to her first. My aunt said that my parents were happy and that my mom did a lot for me and my siblings when we were growing up. Also, she asked if I had a reason for doing all this, but I couldn't really explain because she didn't know how things were when I was growing up at home. She suggested that I should talk to my mom to work things out and didn't really want to take sides in our family matters. My mom got upset with me for sharing my side of the story, saying that I was revealing our family issues to others. It's another example of her being two-faced because she used to tell my relatives that I was misbehaving and looking through her phone. She also said she was going to therapy when she was actually having an affair. I chose to show my dad all the proof I had so he could understand that my mom was not telling the truth about her affair. The next day, while I was still at school, my mom phoned me and her video call didn't go well at all. My boyfriend was with me to help me stay strong, but I don't think I've ever felt so scared and shaky. My mom basically tried to make me believe that this was my mistake and that I shouldn't have gotten involved. She didn't admit or deny cheating on my dad, but she kept talking about how I shouldn't have looked at her phone. She even almost said she'd call the police to have me arrested when I got back from school. I managed to find the courage to tell her that I was ready to face the results of being kicked out because it was worth it for my dad to finally know about the affair. She kept saying that my dad didn't need to know how content he was. My mom also brought up that she felt ignored by my dad, but even if that were somehow true, it doesn't make cheating right. Before we ended the call, she said she still loves me and asked if I wanted to speak to my dad. I said yes after a little while. When I finished the call, my boyfriend was really shocked at how my mom tried to blame me for her own wrongdoings. Anyway, I had a video call with my dad, and some of the things my aunt and mom had said about him weren't accurate. My dad said he was still thinking about whether he should leave or not, and he wasn't angry with me at all. Before calling my mom and aunt, my sister had already talked to my dad's older brother and let him know. My mom got mad at my sister for sharing our private matters with our extended family, but my dad wasn't angry that we told his brother, so that made me feel a little more relieved. After that, I returned from school and had to take my things out of my parents' house. I stayed at my boyfriend's place for around a week and a half, and then I brought some of my clothes to a friend's house that's closer to my job. I didn't quit my job because it has really good benefits that I wouldn't find elsewhere. While I was at school, my mom mentioned she was removing me and my sister from her health insurance. I've been looking for a new apartment and a car until last week. It's been a tough month, but I kind of anticipated it going this way. I'll be meeting my dad, sister, brother, and uncle this weekend at a family gathering, so hopefully we can come up with a plan to help my dad. My brother told me that my mom and dad have been having frequent arguments, and it seems like he's starting to see how tricky she can be. Of course, I'm not there to witness what happens behind closed doors, but I think my mom's situation isn't going very smoothly, and her attempts to confuse and manipulate might not be successful anymore. Honestly, my mom is really harmful and doesn't face any punishment for what she does. I believe this might be the consequences of catching up to her at last. It doesn't help that my mom never says sorry for what she does even when she knows she's done something bad. This has been the way she acts since I was little. My main focus is to mainly help my dad during this time. My brother mentioned that our dad has seemed really down lately. I know it's been really tough for him finding out about what my mom has been doing. They've been together for more than 23 years, so it's a lot to handle. I believe the main challenge for him is sorting out money and finding a new place for him and my brother to stay. It's probably a bit easier for him since he knows my sister and I can take care of ourselves. I might have an advantage since she doesn't know how much I know about her affair. I'm still deciding if I should expose the person she had the affair with and how I would go about it if I choose to. She hasn't even admitted to cheating and is still saying she didn't do anything wrong. I'm really upset because I was texting her last night about my dad giving me a ride to work, and she brought up how this could be avoided if I delete the evidence and say sorry for checking her phone. I'm hoping my dad will eventually consider divorcing her, or at least find a solution for my sister and me. So, my dad, my sister, and I are going on a family trip to take a break from my mom. She's not happy about it. I also learned that my mom and dad have been arguing about me because she doesn't want me to be around anymore, but my dad disagrees. I think my dad might want to divorce my mom, but there seems to be something making it hard for him to make that decision. I feel really sad that my dad doesn't speak up for himself as much as I want him to. I still think my mom isn't taking responsibility for what she did. While I was in school, I realized my mom managed to see the evidence I sent to my dad's phone, but my dad never got the proof I sent. I thought he had seen it. I also found out that my mom didn't want me to spend time with my dad because she knew I might reveal more about her actions. I didn't think I needed to show my dad the evidence again because he already believes my sister and me about my mom's affair. During the trip, we avoided talking about my mom because we were trying to take a break from her and focus on being together. I eventually talked to the girlfriend of the person my mom had an affair with, and she appreciated me showing her all the proof. I understood that she ended things with my mom's affair partner because my mom called me angrily saying I was spreading lies about her and even wishing I wasn't her child. I could tell that it hurt my mom a lot that her affair partner had ended things because everything had become a big problem for him. It was clear that my mom was more affected by her affair partner ending things than by seeing my dad feeling sad about it. My brother told me that my mom and dad are not sharing the same bedroom right now. The reason my dad is unsure about getting a divorce is because it could affect his retirement and everything he has. I can tell he's feeling down, and I try my best to make him feel better by checking on him whenever I can. I really hope he decides to divorce my mom because he's not happy in this loveless relationship. I wish he'd realize that my mom needs him more than he needs her, and that he finds the courage to divorce her and experience what a happier. Thank you for stopping by the channel. Here are a couple of Reddit cheating stories for your listening pleasure. This is long, but I've been struggling on and off for a month, and anyone who can offer some feedback, my heart goes to you. My wife and I are effectively high school sweethearts from different schools together since 16 together, 20 years married for 12, one daughter trying for our second child. Like a lot of infidelity stories, we were not at our highest emotional peak. When it happened, we spent much of 2021 trying for our second child. The pressures and disappointments of it not happening were hard on both of us, knowing how especially hard it had been on her. I constantly tried to be the "it's okay. Next month, we just try again" person with a brave, optimistic face, which was apparently interpreted as "I didn't care." Sex became so regimented around an ovulation schedule. It sucked a lot of fun out of it. She wanted more spice and felt like her needs weren't getting met in that way. But, on the flip side, I had historically hit a lot of brick walls and nose around creativity. So, I too felt like my own needs were underserved. There were some communication roadblocks around all of it. There were also the all too typical challenges of being new parents with limited childcare outside of when we are both at work, not a lot of us time, which leads to a rut feeling. And the feeling of just being at the job and parent. I should note that one thing that makes all of this so much harder is that I am not the jealous or possessive type. And I mean at all. In 20 years, I felt like trust and faithfulness was a pillar of our relationship. I was also well aware of feeling like we were in a pressure rut, and I was proactively taking big steps to fix that. I was taking steps as major as completely changing my role at work. So my hours meant I would be home almost nightly. I had to work evenings about 3 times a week, which was getting hard on all of us. After relying on family for most of 3 years, I was seeking a local sitter to make sure we could start to have a regular day night going forward. And I had some spice up ideas and gifts lined up for that holiday in February. I know there are ups and downs in long-term relationships and that the situation we were in was challenging, but always worth working through. During the fall, she befriended a new male coworker. Like I said, I'm not any jerk jealous and thought nothing of it. A lot of early communication was around sharing he and his wife's own fertility issues with child number two. As time passed, it seemed like he was mentioned more and more in work stories, even though they definitely don't work directly with one another. But again, not the jealous type. A few months ago, we had another crushing month of not getting pregnant. She was particularly emotional this time around and texted me from work saying she had a coworker, made it sound like a girlfriend, asking to take her out for a drink in response to her hard day and asking, would I be fine if she did that while I had our daughter? Of course, go have fun, get your mind off things, chat with a friend. Hell, I've been trying to convince you to do things like this every once in a while for a long time, but you constantly cite mom guilt. Please go. I am an extremely hands-on dad with caretaking, the kiddo, and I have the house held down. Turns out the friend was said coworker. Now I can't stress this enough in 20 years. I don't think I have ever had anything that qualifies as a huge, jealous reaction before she claimed it was platonic, but I was pissed. In retrospect, her failure to mention who the coworker was felt like an intentional omission. She and I rarely had child coverage to have a date night. But in this case, I was used as the childcare to go out for drinks one-on-one with another guy. And in response to her extremely emotional state, I explained that this was a big emotional boundary issue in my eyes. For contrast, I explained that if I had a married female coworker who was feeling emotionally fragile, I would never take her out for drinks one-on-one without knowing her husband personally, or more importantly, knowing it was something he was aware of and comfortable with. She made me sound like I was crazy for thinking it was anything more than just drinks with a friend, but it just didn't pass the straight face test for me. But I quickly gathered myself, talked more rationally about how I felt. She acknowledged that she wasn't thinking about it from my point of view, and we moved on. Fast forward, just under 2 months. It's 6 a.m. and our daughter is always up early. We often alternate getting up with her so the other can get a little bit more sleep. I take her downstairs, and we use my wife's work iPad to run the PBS Kids app. I am not a snoop, but as I go to get it set up, I'm taken aback by the iPad home screen being littered with notifications of private chat messages with this employee, talking about coming over to our house at 7 p.m. the previous night, how they have a fun, uncomplicated arrangement that will have to be put on hold in a few weeks. The week, my schedule was changing for the reasons I said before, and so forth. I was in a total state of shock when I confronted her. She got a look of dread and shame in the little time we had to communicate quietly as to not alert our daughter. I found out that he had been lying to his own family about going to work for his second job, coming over once a week on nights. I worked late for the last 5 weeks straight with the intention to go 2 more rounds until, of course, my schedule wasn't as convenient for their arrangement. She tried to plead that she never meant to hurt me or our relationship, and she was 100% committed to us. I have never been more frazzled and feeling like I was spiraling in my life. I sent a lot of angry texts. As you can imagine, my coworkers knew I wasn't okay. I played it off, like I got bad news on the family health front and had to leave. There was no way I could focus. I drove home and tried to convince myself. Things weren't as bad as it seemed. I went to reread the messages to see if I reacted too strongly and wouldn't, the two had a new chat going. It was clear that he was aware I found out, but the conversation didn't seem to Oh no. In fact, it was a bizarre combination of chatty, Kathy friendly. Talk about what they made for food the night before and her inviting him down to her room at lunch to go through her phone, listing her lock screen password and read her private messages. The angry texts, I don't know about any of you, but if you cheated, crap hit the fan and the wound was extremely fresh. Your claim is that you're committed to the relationship. There's something about immediately going to the affair partner and saying, hey, come have lunch with me and go through my phone. Doesn't sit right on the where's your loyalty front. All the hallmarks of emotional and physical betrayal were there, of course, but there were so many reasons that this was extra bad circumstantially. 1. It was done while we were trying to get pregnant with child. Number 2, after bonding with this person over stories about fertility struggles, that alone is messed up too. There is nothing she cited about where her head was at the time that couldn't also be said about me, but I was working on solutions, and an extramarital affair isn't even on the radar. 3. While we struggled to get us time with the toddler at home, I was effectively used as childcare. So she could have that sort of time out with someone else, which was also the night that talk of each of them wanting more in the bedroom heated up for as far as wanting more goals. I already mentioned my plans for helping break out of the rut, but she had put up so many brick walls with me. It was hard to even know what direction to go and forget crazy ideas to spice things up. We're talking things most couples would consider pretty basic. She wouldn't please me orally because it gave her lockjaw that she could never do a certain position sexually because it hurt and that her OBGYN has acknowledged that had something to do with her pelvis, that she was long past wearing anything that wasn't comfortable underneath. That she's been extremely self-conscious about her breasts since nursing and always wanted to keep them covered since, and you know what? Even if there were things I wanted, I would never push her in any way. She wasn't comfortable, but come to find out everything she ever took off the table for me was apparently on the table for him during the affair, even busted out lingerie. She wore on our wedding night that she never wore for me again. In 12 years, 5, we've been together since we were 16 frigging years old. She is the only person I've ever been with. While it's natural for anyone to have passing curiosities in a lifetime, it creates this imbalance when one person acts on them and only one is left faithful for basically life, whether it was stopping the affair to begin with or taking extremely active steps to improve communication and things with us. None of these were conclusions that happened on their own. This wasn't a, what have I done? This was a mistake and I need to come clean moment. This was over time, methodical and had planned for more, but I got caught. Attempts at improving anything with us in ways she never did before all just feel like concessions. Now, the fallout is a long separate story in itself. I spent 2 weeks sleeping on separate floors. Most nights we had big emotional powwows, sometimes in ways that could have been considered productive, but I have a hard time letting the most hurtful thing someone has done to me be viewed as any sort of positive turning point. I have been trying to give reconciliation a shot, but my feelings about it and what it means for our relationship are all over the map. Before I say too much about it, I could just really use some feedback to anyone who got through all of that. Thanks for listening. Hello, everyone. My marriage story is different than the rest of the stories posted here. It will be a long one as well. Please have a look at it. I am not from the US, but I have been working here in the US since I was 23. And now I am 30 and going to be 31 soon. I am from a developing country, and I did both my bachelor's and master's in computer science engineering from an Ivy League school here in the US. So basically, I have been in the US since I was 16. My father is a government employee and my mother is a homemaker. I have an elder sister who is a doctor, and she is married and mother of 2 children. Both me and my sister were brilliant academically. She wanted to be a doctor, and she is now. I wanted to be an engineer and wanted to pursue my bachelor's in the US. I am currently working in a world-renowned company that we all know. We use the company products every day in all walks of our life. I have an arranged marriage. When I got married, I was 27 and my wife was 21. After completion of my master's and getting the job in my dream company, I moved to a new city. I stayed with two of my friends in a shared accommodation for 3 years. Then one of my friends got married, and so we vacated that place and took our own place to rent. I took a three-bedroom, four-bath apartment in a posh area in the city, which is 15 minutes away from my office. I met an American man in the new apartment complex, and he was my neighbor. He is a car salesman for a high-end car company distributor and was sharing the apartment with two guys. He helped me a lot. I mean a lot. I considered him as a close friend. He voluntarily would come to me once a week and will ask me if I need help. I would invite him to both lunch and dinner at my place. Almost every weekend, he would come to my place to watch sports. And we will talk about various topics. Whenever I will go home, my mother will send a lot of gifts for him, and he is always very happy to receive them as well. I never asked him about his personal life neither. He also never asked me anything. Anyway, I got married and of course he was invited. And I booked tickets for him and paid for the visa. He was not able to go because of some work-related thing. My wife came with me after her visa processing. I was very happy. My wife is very beautiful. I am a tall guy, 6 feet 3 inches, and my wife is 5 feet 8 inches. She came from a well-established family and a lovely person. She has a bachelor's degree in history. 7 months back, I was at home working and I heard my wife crying. I walked up to her and asked what happened. She was in the living room, on the couch watching TV. I thought something on TV she saw made her cry. Upon asking, she started bawling and I was clueless. And I was still thinking it's because of the TV, but I was unable to find anything emotional on the TV. She started saying how sorry she was and how she ruined everything. I was still trying to understand what was happening and told her, "Don't worry. We can always fix whatever was ruined. No need to cry. And she looks ugly while crying, and she should always smile." The next 6 to 8 hours were hell for me. She told me how 2 years back, for a month, I worked 20 hours every day on a very important project. My friend and my wife went on a sex rampage. Basically, she told me I would leave for the office at 3:45 in the morning, and my friend would come over at 4 and they would do their thing. And he would leave right before I got back, right around midnight. It went on for exactly 1 month and everything stopped after that month. Also, my friend left the apartment complex the next month as well. He rarely speaks to me or responds to my text messages anymore. I will write some more, but later. Thanks for reading. Don't know what I am asking or interested to know. This story was shared to us by a listener. I want to thank him for sharing his story. My situation is unique because I found out about my wife cheating. After she passed away, my wife grew up with both parents. They went to church every Sunday. Since she was born, we've been married for 13 years and dating. Since we were 18 years old, we have 3 kids and a house. The kids were 8, 11, and 13. When she passed away in 2020, we made around the same amount for years. She made between $3,600 to $4,000 a month as an RN. I made between $3,000 to $5,000 a month as a wholesale supplier. I saw several signs and blatantly ignored them. Here are some of the signs I ignored. Her phone was on the floor. I went to pick it up and put it on the charger. She jumped out of her sleep and asked me what I'm doing with her phone. I thought to myself, the only reason she would react in such a way, if she's cheating. Another sign, we were talking in the front room. She showed me a video clip of a guy in New York who does sexual massages. I grabbed the phone from her so I can view it myself. She started going crazy and fighting me over it. I eventually gave it back to her. But the biggest sign I ignored, she said she was going to a club one night. She didn't come home until 4:30 in the morning. We had a big argument about coming home. So late, the only reason I didn't jump to conclusions, she was cheating. In the first year of our marriage, I stayed out until 5 in the morning with my friend. We went to the club, then chilled outside talking. I wasn't with the girl, nor was I cheating. My phone ends up dying. So, she couldn't get in contact with me. When I finally came home, she didn't accuse me of cheating and said she was concerned. She called the cops to report me missing, but she had to wait 24 hours. The last sign before she passed away, maybe 4 to 6 days prior, I asked her if I could use her phone to post clothes on Facebook for advertising. She was hesitant, then started going over her phone. I said to myself, that's something I would do if I were cheating. I reassured her I wouldn't go through her phone because I didn't want to know if she was cheating. Besides, I trust her. She gave me her phone, and I went into the room. After 10 minutes of using her phone and posting on Instagram and Facebook, I decided to go in her direct message on Instagram. I went to a conversation she had with her best friend. I said to myself, if she's cheating, her best friend would know. I read a little bit of the conversation. It wasn't anything there. I went to the text messages and noticed text messages by a trainer. I saw a little bit of the conversation, then closed out because I felt bad about going through her phone. After I told her I wouldn't, that's when she walked to the room to see if I was using her phone. I told her I was almost done, but I found it odd again. I said to myself, she's showing signs of a cheater. We had a conversation months prior to her passing about cheating. I asked her if I cheated on her. What would she do? Her reply, I don't know, because I have never dealt with you cheating before. I found it odd because we started dating at 18. We've always agreed the relationship is over. If one of us cheats, I told her, I'd rather you divorce me because I don't want to know. I don't know how I would react. I read stories from men murdering their family or abusing their spouse and going to jail. I have listened to songs about a guy committing suicide after discovering his wife cheating. Another song about a guy dying in a car crash after going through his girl's phone. I didn't want to be in that predicament. So, I convinced myself not wanting to know is the best option. All the signs I ignored were within the last year of her passing. She passed away in September of 2020. When I got home to tell the kids, we started crying and the kids were screaming. It's the most gut-wrenching experience in my life. It still haunts me till this day. When I think about it, I got her phone from my youngest son and asked if they knew the password. The youngest one told me the code. I told myself I would keep my word by not going through her phone, even in death. I planned on deleting the text messages when I got time to do it. I announced her passing on Facebook. I planned to keep her memory alive by posting pictures every day. I decided to bury her next to my mother, where we agreed to be buried after my mother passing. About 5 days after she passed, a guy sends her a video message from the Caribbean islands where she went on vacation. I decided to respond to him as her to find out if anything went on between them. By the conversation, they sent video messages back and forth. How are you doing conversations? I decided to call her friend and ask her about it because they went on vacation together. My wife's girlfriend, Nancy, played it off and said they took his information because they wanted a travel guide. The next time they went, she told me, your wife loved you. The day after the funeral, I wanted to post a video of her instead of a picture. I went through the trash area of her phone. As I'm scrolling, I noticed a naked picture of a man. I thought to myself, if you go down the rabbit hole, it's no turning back, but I couldn't turn a blind eye now. That's when I decided to go through her phone. When I went to her Facebook Messenger, I didn't see anything. Just conversations with her friends. I went through her text messages. It was a treasure trove of information. I read the whole conversation with the personal trainer. As I'm going back in the conversation, I found sexting, nudes, and texts saying, I can't talk right now because he's next to me. As I'm reading everything, I became furious and started having a nervous breakdown. I'm thinking to myself, I wish she was here so I could confront her. I felt like she got away without talking to me. Now I'm brainstorming about everything. I see the personal trainer's address. I decided to Google it because it seemed familiar, and it was. I remember going to his apartment to pick up her gym clothes months prior to their sexual encounter. I felt disrespected and violated. I decided to call her best friends because I wanted answers. I had to piece the story together as much as possible. I knew they wouldn't give me any information. So, I had to trick them by threatening to expose their infidelity on social media. I called her best friend, Nancy, again, because she dealt with her every day. She didn't want to tell me anything, but she felt compelled since she didn't want my wife's information exposed. She told me after the club one night, my wife went to a hotel and almost had sex with a guy, but he couldn't get aroused. I guess she thought that wouldn't piss me off. The friend didn't know about the guy I found in her phone. The guy she told me about was different. The friend explained when I went to the club with my wife, they would see each other and wouldn't say anything. Now I'm steaming in my head because I'm in the same club with the guy sleeping with my wife. I asked Nancy why she didn't divorce me. If she was going to cheat, she said, because she felt like you were a good father. After I heard that, I felt used and manipulated for her to stay with me because she didn't want to co-parent and handle financial obligations by herself was an insult. Especially when she's making $8,000 a month as an APRN. She got her master's in November 2019 and started working a new job in January 2020, 9 months before she passed away. I decided to call her friends to find out what went on behind my back. I barely got any information after threatening to expose her. One person told me she used to flirt with a coworker. That's it. As the days went on, after discovering everything, I read the text messages with all our friends. Nancy told my wife about her cousin being interested in her. My wife told her to give him her number. Now I'm furious as hell. I decided to call her again to speak about the situation. I'm screaming and yelling obscenities. She's gasping and sighing on the phone. I told Nancy she will never see the kids again. Now she's hurt and making excuses for her involvement by saying she got nothing to do with it. I told her, "You're the one who told my wife. Your cousin was interested and exchanged numbers." A few days later, I decided to get in contact with Nancy's boyfriend and tell him about Nancy going to hotels with other men. All the information in my wife's phone, I gave him one of the guy's phone numbers so he could get in contact with him. I told him not to react right away, just get access to her phone and go through it because she switched the names around. He calls me back 2 weeks later and tells me about the aftermath. He said he waited 10 days to confront her. He went through a Facebook Messenger since he had access to it, but he didn't see much, only little signs. When he went to confront her at the hiking trail, he grabbed the phone from her and she panicked. Then said she's going to call the cops. So, he decided to break the phone since he's the one paying for it. As I'm going through my wife's phone some more, I see conversations with multiple men. I see one conversation that alarmed me with her friend, Amy. It implied the guy she almost had sex with was interested in a threesome, which seemed to intrigue my wife. I remember a conversation we had around the time. My wife asked me if I would be interested in a threesome. I told her no, because it goes against my religious beliefs. Even though I would be interested, I think she was using me as a moral gauge. I saw Cash App payments from the guy to her after she went out to eat with him. Plus, I remember the day because she said she would bring some food home from the restaurant, but she changed her mind because the food wasn't good. I saw conversations with other friends saying I was jealous of her. I never specified in detail why I'm jealous of her. I'm left to assume it's over me trying to prevent her from doing something that costs her life. She's telling associates I'm mean and nasty to her because countless arguments over finances and cleaning. She wouldn't clean up the house and spent most of her money on vacations, shopping, and partying. While my money was tied up paying bills, I'm not going to lie. I was verbally abusive to her, but I felt justified in my actions because I wanted more out of life than living check to check and living in a nasty house. It was countless insults behind my back by her, to my sisters and boss. After she died and I had to take care of all the bills, I found out she was 2 months behind on the car insurance. The washer and dryer were not paid off after I gave her half of the money to take care of it. A month later, I told her the washing machine wasn't working. Her reply, "It was stopped working after we paid it off." She took 15 days to pay the mortgage certain amounts after I gave her half the money to pay it before the grace period. To make matters worse, I found out she was smoking marijuana. That startled me because since teenagers, we agreed to never smoke marijuana. If I knew she was smoking, I would have told her to stop or I'll leave. I decided to tell two of my kids about their mother's infidelity and the not-so-kind words she expresses about her kids to Nancy's cousin. The oldest one got extremely mad and told me to remove all her pictures from the wall. The 11-year-old seemed indifferent about it. His main concern was beating up the guys she slept with. I had to explain to him why it's inappropriate when she slept with them willingly. I never told the youngest one what his mother did. I felt like he wouldn't understand. Sometimes he feels left out because his other brothers know, plus he was confused with the removal of her pictures. He said, "It felt like I didn't love his mother." Now I'm wrestling with the idea of moving her casket. I don't want her next to my mother. I don't want to be buried next to her. I decided to research if she could be transferred to her father's cemetery and the cost. When I decided to tell her brother about my decision, he objected to it, asking why I never had a full conversation with him or the mother over their daughter's infidelity. It felt awkward telling them since their perception of her was a righteous woman. I felt like it would be a tough pill to swallow. Her mother heard about her daughter cheating indirectly. Her niece told her I found information on her phone. I told her brother about her indiscretions in a roundabout way, but the phone hung up without me knowing. I was talking on the phone to nobody for 10 to 15 minutes. I took it as a sign. He wasn't meant to know the details. When I told my sisters about moving her, they told me not to make any rash decisions and give it a year. My wife's family doesn't want her casket moved. I decided to leave her next to my mother, but I'm not getting her a headstone, which some of the family members are upset about. I won't allow anybody else to get her one. If they decide to do it without my consent, I'll have it removed. I haven't been able to visit my mother since September the 26th, 2020. I used to visit her several times within a week. I stopped going after my wife was buried next to her. I feel like if I go see my mother, I'll be paying my respects to her as well. 3 weeks after my wife died, I met a girl and went out on a date with her and we hit it off. She ends up getting pregnant 2 months later, but the timing was horrible, especially dealing with my kids and public perception. 2 months later, after my girlfriend announced her pregnancy, Nancy decided to make a long post on Facebook using a fake page, disparaging me by saying my wife took care of the finances and kids. She stated I was in the house with the kids, but I didn't take care of them. Also, she said I wasn't capable of putting half the money down on a house. Plus hinted at me cheating on my wife, because it's no way my new girlfriend popped up pregnant 2 months after my wife died. One of my sisters felt the same way and asked questions in a roundabout way to debunk their theory. My daughter was born in July 2021. So, my girlfriend had to get pregnant in October or November. She lived in California before coming back to Connecticut to help her mother. She came back in June 2020, 2 months before my wife passed away. Besides, my wife and girlfriend are friends with my female boss I work for at a car wash. So, it's no way possible for me to get away with cheating. I would be paranoid to pull it off. Plus, the most important part, I don't want to go to my kids and tell them the reason daddy had to leave the house because I cheated. My girlfriend planned to go back to California with her mother in a few months. She only came back to help her mother sell the condo. After getting pregnant, she stayed with me to give birth to my daughter. I'm not a big believer in karma, but somehow I feel like the string of events was timed. My wife became an RN in 2007 and started making $3,600 a month. She went back to school in 2014 to get her master's. She received her master's in late 2019. She started her new job as an APRN in January of 2020, making $8,000 a month. For the 13 years we were married, I didn't know about her life insurance policy. I knew she had one, but I didn't know the details. After she passed, I looked into everything. Her job from 2014 to 2019, she had an insurance policy for both of us for $40,000 and less for the kids. When she started her new job in 2020, she only had life insurance policy on herself for 6 figures. It shocked me. She didn't have one for the kids and took the minimum policy through her job. I'm assuming she wanted to keep as much money for herself in her paycheck. I remember having an argument with her about not having life insurance to bury me. I told her I'm not dying anytime soon. And if I do, just wrap me up and bury me without a casket. So, it's not costly. At the time, I was looking at life insurance with my credit union, but I was procrastinating. For years, I prevented my wife from having surgery done. When my mother died in December of 2019, I was depressed and devastated. I decided she can get surgery work done because I didn't want to control her life, but I told her I prefer her not to do it. If she does it, she's on her own. I am not going to the appointments. I don't want to know anything because I don't approve of the surgery. I was trying to deter her from doing it on her own will. She decides to do it anyway and passed away 9 days after the surgery. I feel like she had the surgery done to build up her self-esteem when she's out cheating. Recently, I found more information on my wife's phone. It's hundreds of videos of her talking to her friends. The videos are 10 to 15 minutes long, but I found a video of her talking about being in love with a third guy. She insinuated they had sex, but I don't have anything concrete because I didn't watch all the videos. Most of the conversation with the friends are about work. I don't want to invest a large amount of time watching videos all day. If her family gets upset over the headstone, I'll probably watch all the videos to cement why she can't get one. In the end, I think about it every day and get upset, especially not being able to confront her. My girlfriend says I should be happy at the end of the day. I got the house, life insurance, and the kids. After thinking about it, she's right. If my wife was alive and I found out, my life would have been upside down. I would have to stay with one of my sisters and start over. I didn't know anything about hiring a private investigator or getting evidence to prove infidelity for divorce until listening to stories on Reddit. I probably wouldn't have been able to force the sale of the house since the house is solely in her name. My credit was bad at the time and I didn't want to ruin our chances, but I put half the payment down and paid half the mortgage every month. I blindly trusted her because she went to church all her life. She held many titles in church. I thought she was incapable of cheating. If she did cheat, she probably slept with one guy. But I don't know how many men she slept with, and I'm left to conclude. It could have been over 10 guys because my girlfriend found Facebook conversations on paper from 2011, 2013, and 2016 with her flirting. She was supposed to meet up with one guy, but one of the kids got sick. So, in the end, I got the house, 6 figures, the kids, and a girlfriend who will clean up and do what my wife and I were married for 10 years. I was her first, and I thought, only sexual partner. We married at 22 years old, and when the story I'm about to tell you took place, we were 32. I was told she went on a vacation with her sister, but throughout the week she was gone, her responses became weird and less frequent. I was already worried by the time she got back, and my fears were only confirmed by her very strange behavior. She said she didn't feel well, and this was right before COVID reached the US, so she made a doctor's appointment. After that one, she went to a second one, but wouldn't tell me what was going on. I was in the dark and cared about my wife. I wanted answers, so I decided to search her car for appointment summaries or anything that might give me some clues. In her car, I found an open STD test and a visit summary from her doctor that said she tested positive for herpes. I started shaking and didn't want to believe it. I sat in her car for a while, staring at the trees around me. I obviously couldn't sleep with my wife again. Then I got scared I already had it. I went to stay with my mom for a few days while I waited for my own test results. My wife barely noticed my absence because she was dealing with her own problems. Thank God my test results were clean. She didn't get it from me or give it to me. Now I could address the issue at hand. My wife had to face reality. I was already irritated that she didn't tell me anything about it. I had lots of questions, but they didn't really need answering. I didn't really need to know how she got herpes, only that she did, while she was on vacation with her sister. Her sister worked with her in the same office, which gave me an idea. I received an email invite to a work party, and attached to that email were all the emails of her coworkers and bosses. I emailed everyone a picture of my wife's diagnosis, with a text that said my wife brought home a present from vacation. The response was astounding. Before my wife realized what I did, her sister called me. She asked what was going on, and I told her all about it. She admitted that she wasn't with my wife the whole time they were gone. At first, she thought I was being really unfair by sharing my wife's private issue with her work crew, but after I vented to her about it and brought up the impending divorce, she sided with me. Just then my wife came outside and banged on the car window. She looked furious and terrified. She screamed and cried inaudible words. I got out of the car and she started hitting me, but stopped when I told her she cheated on me. She couldn't keep it together. She was overwhelmed and probably hadn't even let the reality of her STD or infidelity sink in. I told her she cheated on me while on vacation and got herpes. She betrayed me, and now I would never sleep with her again. She cried breathlessly, tried saying sorry, tried saying she used protection, but none of it mattered, and I think she knew that. She went back inside the house, defeated after I told her to pack her stuff. Her sister came over because she was on the phone for some of our confrontations. She helped her pack and calmed her down by talking about the future she could have. All the motivation left her when she tried to go to work. She received so much backlash and shame for what she did to me. Whether it was to her face or notes left on her desk, she was insulted, called out, and slandered. She only worked for one day after vacation before quitting. Her sister's been really quiet, and as far as I know, she still lives with her. It wouldn't surprise me if she quit dating for a while, or even had trouble forgiving herself. I know I lucked out and dodged a bullet by doing my own investigation and separating myself from her while I figured out what I needed to know. I hope she uses protection and tells people about her diagnosis and cheating habits. Opie, I am so sorry your wife completely disrespected you and spat on your trust. She'll have trouble living this mistake down. You were a trusting husband that let her go on vacation without you in good faith. She took advantage of you by sleeping with another man, and it's only karma that she got an STD. I am so glad she didn't try to seduce you upon her return before you knew what was happening. You really did dodge a bullet with this one. I'm glad to hear she couldn't hide her diagnosis and had to face the shame she deserved for betraying her husband. Any woman who believes she needs another man to love her needs a serious reality check. Love is designed to be true between two people that openly communicate and choose to love the other no matter what. Quite the opposite of taking advantage of the trust your spouse gives you. I wish you the best of luck. You've absolutely did the right thing and acted on your wisdom to figure out what was going on. Thank you for sharing your story. Now, let's get into today's second story. Last Valentine's Day with my wife, 33, was the end of our 7-year marriage. She was supposed to get off work at 5, but at 4:50 she texted me to say her aunt has a date for Valentine's, and since she has trouble finding dates, she felt obligated to babysit her kids for her. I, 40, said that was fine and I could meet her there. She told me that wouldn't be necessary. Her aunt was weird about having men at her house because her children were in recovery from their abusive father, who had been out of the picture for some time now. This conversation really bummed me out, but I figured if my wife could be so self-sacrificing on this romantic day, then I could for an hour. I believed my wife's story, but then she posted a status update that gave her location. She thought ahead and made it so neither I nor our mutual friends could see her post, but she forgot about one person. Her 15-year-old cousin, the girl she was supposed to be babysitting. She actually messaged me to ask how I was doing and gave me some disconcerting news. She showed me the screenshot of my wife's status and location, which said she was having a wonderful Valentine's Day at an upscale restaurant. Her cousin was one heck of a snoop and knew something was amiss because my wife didn't tag me or include a picture of her and I together like she always did. Due to the inconsistencies, she decided to show me. She didn't know that my wife used her as a lie in the babysitting ruse, but I left that part out and just thanked her. I checked the family locator app, which we both never thought about since we were always together and my wife's cell phone was no longer at the restaurant. She was in a neighborhood. I decided to see what other snooping I could manage, so I messaged one of my wife's coworkers on Facebook. She didn't hesitate to tell me that something was probably going on with her and a guy from the office. She said they would often deliver work papers to each other's cubicle, but she believed they were handwritten notes. They also ate lunch together in the small office kitchen every day. It seems they were trying to make it look like they were only coworkers, but there was something more to it. I couldn't believe how easy it was to gather intel from people had I been blind. I wanted to check my wife's phone, but since I couldn't, I told her coworker about her Valentine's Day lie and how she was in a different neighborhood at that very moment. She asked if it was the Sunny Day development, and I was shocked that it was. She said AP lived there. She was at his house once for a party. I showed her the exact spot my wife's icon hovered over the neighborhood, and she said it was definitely close enough to be his house. I had enough. I thanked her and got off social media. I started throwing my wife's clothes and belongings out the window. Loose clothes were strewn all over the yard and roof. It started raining before she got home, and I thought karma was just giving me an extra hand. I wrote a note to put on our front door that read, "Happy Valentine's Day. Don't bother coming back ever again." When she got home late, I could hear her screaming and freaking out. She banged on the door, rang the doorbell a whole bunch, but I barricaded myself inside. I heard her on the phone with her mom and then her dad, and from what I could hear, it sounded like they couldn't believe she was locked out of her own house with her clothes all over the yard. She kept saying she didn't know why, but eventually broke down and said she lied to me and had a date with someone else, so she needed her dad's help taking all her stuff somewhere. I imagine they asked her why she did this, because all she said was she didn't know. She didn't want to tell me in case I freaked out and stuff like that. She sounded like a pitiful little girl that made a shameful decision to lie and cheat on her husband, believing she could get away with it. And now she was forced to semi-admit to what she'd done over the phone with her dad, so that he could come to her rescue. He showed up and I came outside. I told them both what I found out, all while my wife was gone. She was crying and telling me I was exaggerating and jumping to conclusions. I put her on the spot to prove I was lying by showing me the messages she had with AP. I knew his real name and her face turned pale when I asked. She said she didn't have any messages with him, but I could see her father's disappointment. I asked him if he thought she was lying because he knew her the best, and he was embarrassed to say yes. She started screaming and wailing and dropped to the ground. I told her to suck it up because she was a big girl who made the decision to cheat on me and lie this Valentine's Day. Now she had to face the consequences of her big girl decision. She was devastated. I could tell she didn't want our marriage to end that night. She didn't want it to end. She wouldn't ever step foot into our house again. She didn't get to say goodbye to our dog. It's lucky I never had children with her because that would have been heart-wrenching. Let this be a lesson to think through your actions before betraying the one person that matters most in your life. No actions go without repercussions. She stayed with her parents for a while, but they were extremely disappointed in her and couldn't believe a word she said. She didn't get to leave their house at all unless it was for work, and she wasn't welcome back if she was 5 minutes past her expected return. Ope. I am so sorry your wife betrayed you on Valentine's Day. Of course, it's just the same as any other day, but since it's become notorious for true love, it adds insult to injury. I'm so glad you did some sleuthing to figure out what was going on. I'm glad the girl she used as part of her lie stepped forward without even knowing your wife brought her into it. Your ex turned a kind gesture into a lie you couldn't believe. No one can maintain a relationship with that kind of dishonesty. Can you even imagine how hard it would be to have a healthy relationship with her after this? Your ex needs to mature a little and learn how important it is to remain loyal and honest in her relationships. Without that, she doesn't deserve the benefits of a romantic partnership. As hard as it was, you took the right steps to distance yourself from this girl. I wish you the best of luck. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment below with your thoughts on what happened.